Good evening, USC Trojan family, and welcome to our alumni career webinar entitled Preparing for Career Transition at 40 Plus. My name is Lori Shreve Blake, and I'm the Senior Director for Career Engagement at the USC Career Center. Thank you for attending the webinar this evening. This will be an engaging discussion with our esteemed alumni panelists, and please add your questions to the Q&A portion of the webinar. We'll have about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A before the hour is up. It is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panelists for this evening. One of our panelists for this discussion is Kathy Kristoff. Kathy is editor, founder, and CEO of SideHustle.com. However, she prefers the title of Queen of Everything. Prior to founding SideHustle.com, Kristoff was an award-winning financial journalist, writing for a variety of publications, including the LA Times, CBS News, Kiplinger, Reuters, Forbes, and Inc. Decades of experience digging into corporate finance regulations and consumer legislation was a great background for the work she does at SideHustle.com. Here, Kristoff dives into the heavy legalese that makes up the terms and conditions that govern most freelance relationships. When she discovers a red flag, she digs further to find out how that provision impacts SideHustle.com, which serves individual freelancers. SideHustle.com publishes the most complete and accurate reviews of the gigs that freelancers can choose from an online platform. She's the author of not one, not two, but 3 books entitled Investing 101, Taming the Tuition Tiger, and Kathy Kristoff's Complete Guide to Dollars and Cents. A super fun fact about Kathy, and I've never met anybody before with this super fun fact, is she was also once a Jeopardy question. And the question was, Kathy Kristoff replaced what famous personal finance columnist when she died in 1991? The answer was Sylvia Porter. Our second esteemed panelist for this evening is Mark Jaffe. Mark leads a strategic growth consulting business that empowers manufacturing, service, and technology companies to realize new revenue streams and achieve growing, healthy business organizations from a foundation of sound strategic analysis. His past clients include Red Bull, where Mark developed a successful retail and channel introduction strategy, a DTC skincare company that grew from 400% from 2018 to 2022, and a well-known cosmetic company which has grown from 2 million to well over 70 million from 2014 to 2020. His track record of corporate leadership includes serving as the head of Walt Disney Records, and you'll see from his background, he has a lot of records at his house that have been framed, where he increased revenues from 30 million to 120 million over a 5-year period, and was responsible for The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and the Mermaid soundtracks. He is also a published author, having written Suitcase of Happiness, a roadmap to achieve and enjoy your happiest life. Please join me in giving a warm virtual Trojan welcome for our esteemed panelists, Kathy and Mark. So Kathy and Mark, thank you again so much for sharing this evening with us, this next hour with us of discussion and question and answers for our alumni who are considering a career pivot. We know the Great Resignation happened, that we've all lived now through the pandemic and are still living through it. And we want work that matters. I know there's an old saying, if you do the work you love, you never work a day in your life. And that work that you love changes from 18, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 plus. So without further ado, I'd like to ask the first question of our panel, and we'll start with Kathy and then have Mark chime in as well. Kathy, if you would, please define what is a career pivot?
It can be almost anything. For me, it was going from first an employee to being a freelance worker, trying to learn the web when I had been a print reporter forever. And then, to actually starting my own website and kind of doing everything, which I guess when you start your own business is one of the humbling factors. You not only do the things that you're good at, you do all the things that you're really bad at. So you face failure every single day. But then if you don't, you're probably not stretching very hard. So, I mean, you can do anything. Obviously, you can go into a new industry. You can go into the same industry in just a different way.
Okay, great. Mark, how would you define it?
I would say it's a significant shift in either the industry in which you participate in, the function in which you participate, or your status as an employee or as a contractor. And it's usually a considered shift that takes a tremendous amount of thought and planning. And oftentimes, at least in my career, I found that the one time I didn't take a lot of thought and planning, I made the wrong career pivot. The right ones happen when you really think about it and you really plan for it.
Okay, great. So my next question is, and I think that's a good segue to the next question, which is, you mentioned, Mark, planning for it. So I'll start with you, Mark. What factors should alumni consider when making a career pivot, either from one one organization to another one, maybe doing the same job, maybe changing industries, going from development to sales, or even starting their own business? What are those factors that they should consider?
Well, there's quite a few, but the one that resonates most for me at this point is passion. I mean, when I left Marshall, I went into the advertising industry, and this is obviously an early career pivot. And I realized after a couple of years, advertising wasn't for me. I didn't really like advertising. And I said, well, what do I like? I mean, work is really, sometimes half of your day. It should be maybe a third of your day, but it's often half your day. And I realized I love the music industry. And I made a very considered career pivot into music. And I think as a result of my passion for music and the passion for the industry, I was able to rise up to become the head of Walt Disney Records. My next big career pivot was when I got too old for the music industry. I realized I'm the oldest guy in the room in a lot of these companies in which I was slowly transitioning into with my career. And I realized I needed to leave. And again, I had to say, what am I passionate about? And at that point, back in the late 1990s, as music was going through its transition, I realized I was passionate about software. I was passionate about changing the nature of the buying experience on the internet. And so out of nowhere, I started a software company with a guy that I met in Seattle that created buying decision systems. Now, that required me to fly to Seattle every single week for years in order to run this company with him, which really tested my passion, tested my family's passion for me, quite frankly, because there are a lot of sacrifices. And without the passion needed to do everything it takes, and it always takes more than you think it takes to change careers and to pivot, you need that passion because that's what fuels your drive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Mark. Anything you would add in terms of factors that one should consider, Kathy, when making that pivot that Mark had mentioned?
I think that over the course of your career, you begin to see that you start going a direction that maybe it wasn't the direction that you started, but somehow your interests, your passions are leading you in a new direction. I think that those things should just be little clues to you of, like, okay, do I really dive all the way into this? Do I get additional education so that I can see if this is something that I would be truly passionate about, or whether it's an interest but not a passion. The other thing I will always tell people you should do is be fiscally responsible in your own life early and consistently, because it gives you choices that other people don't have. When I decided to start Side Hustle, I was leaving a very, very lucrative freelance career for something that I didn't know whether I was going to make money at, and certainly didn't make money at for a good long time. And I could make that choice. I could follow that passion because I had saved and I had invested, and it was not as big of a risk. And I think for a lot of people, what they find, and this is the bad part, is if you don't do that, basic, setting the foundation of your career, of your life, if you don't do that, you just don't have the option of pivoting like other people do. Or you actually have to start, you have to pivot in a different way. You have to pivot, you have to make sure that there's a safety net on the other side. If you are financially responsible, you can jump and you're fine. You've got a parachute.
Yeah, I would add one other thing that I think is important for us being over 40. We have more insight than we did when we were 20. We can do an honest self-assessment as to what we're really good at that transcends a particular position definition or particular industry expertise. I mean, I know when I was doing the last transition, which was 15 years ago, to a consulting practice, I realized I am really good at growing revenue. I really get how to have companies make more money. And I thought, what do I do with that? And then I realized that could be a consulting niche. And that again required tremendous passion, because the first 2 years I got a handful of referrals, but they really weren't enough to sustain me. But over time, and I know we're going to talk about networking and other things later, but over time, through that passion, and because I actually was very good at it, I was able to get a lot more clients. So I think, when you're older, you have the ability to do this self-assessment, determine what you're good at, and then apply that to the next pivot.
Yes. And in both of your cases, did you have informational interviews and talk to people that were working in industries that maybe you hadn't worked in or had made these pivots? And how instrumental was that in terms of helping you to make the pivot, of actually talking to people who are working in these industries and getting sage advice from them?
Wow, I'd like to say that I did the right thing and I did all that preparatory work, but I just decided I was going to pivot and here's where I was going to go. And then part of the plunging in on the pivot was saying, okay, now how do I actually implement this? And those people, you're right, are invaluable. I mean, for me, it was once I decided to go all in, I was going to find out everything I could about how to do it successfully.
Yeah, I'd like to pretend that I did all that work as well before I made the leap, but really I made a leap based on my own financial situation. I knew I had, I actually put 2 years worth of living expenses in the bank. And I figured if I couldn't figure it out within 2 years, there was something seriously wrong with me. And so as it turned out, I didn't end up needing any of that money, and I, could invest it back, and that was fine. But I actually made this my first pivot in 2008, which, like the worst recession since the Great Depression. Like, what was I thinking? Oh, leave a steady job at the worst possible time, but worked out.
I think that's such a good point, Kathy. I hadn't really thought about that, but when I made my pivot from music to software, I also was financially secure for a year or two. And so I was less concerned with making money. And I think we've got to be honest with ourselves. Are we pivoting because we really need a job right now? Which makes the pivot even harder to do because there's usually more lag time, or are we pivoting because we have a certain passion that we want to see fulfilled and we have the financial security to weather the storm until that passion is successful.
That's actually, to me, why it makes so much sense for people to pivot at these older ages, is that you are financially stable, or hopefully you are financially stable. And so you have the ability to make choices, to take risks that you couldn't do when you were 20, and taking a risk would, land you on your parents' couch or something. You can do this. And I think that also is one of the reasons why it's worth really considering whether you want to, because there's a significance in what you can do as a second act that is not the same when what you're interested in is earning money, making a name for yourself, all that stuff. I think, once you can say, been there, done that, now, where do you want to make your mark? And that can be really fun and exciting.
That's great. Yes, fun and exciting. And then the other thing is, for those people who maybe don't have the nest egg, what advice would you give them who are trying to make a career pivot? They don't have a year's worth of salary saved or more, and maybe they don't have the golden handcuffs. So what advice would you give them if they're trying to still pivot? They're up to here with being done with their job, and they just need this to, pursue their passion and make a change. What advice do you give those people? And we could start with Kathy.
I'm going to say Coursera, there are a tremendous number of online learning options that are inexpensive and widely available. Many of them are subsidized by companies that desperately need people, often in technology, cybersecurity, just all sorts of where the world is going. It also, though, things like nursing and, there are a tremendous number of careers that, at least when I was going through school, were not, they were not the careers that people went into. I mean, and nobody really talked about a tech career, but now, of course, it's giant. And you can get the training that you need inexpensively and walk away with a job. I mean, in particular with the tech careers, there's such demand for them that you literally, you'll get your certificate. Somebody will be, signing you to work for them right away. So you don't have to have that cushion to survive. And there are other careers as well. I mean, there's a giant labor shortage in healthcare. There are actually labor shortages in all sorts of areas. And so just take a look at those places and see whether these are things you want to do. And if that is not your passion, and what you need to do is create a cushion for yourself so that you can make the passion change, then I'm going to recommend that you find a side hustle. And so, just back to my strength, we research, review, and rate somewhere between 450 and 500 online platforms that they're kind of pick and play. You go there, they will help you find a job that will pay you anywhere from, 15 to hundreds of dollars an hour. Many of the consulting platforms are extremely lucrative. And so you don't have to drive for Uber, but you can certainly earn extra money and sock that away until you're able to make the change that you want to make.
I have another thought. I'm thinking that you make your career pivot your second job. When you are not working, you are working on your career pivot, and you devote 3 hours, 4 hours a day, one day on the weekend. And that's your second job, is researching and maybe even investing a little money in trying to make some money to just test out that this works. You don't necessarily have to give up your job. You don't have to necessarily give up your financial position in the company you're in. At some point, you're going to have to take that leap of faith. At some point you will, if this is going to be your career pivot, but you have the luxury of the time that you're not working to actually create this second job for yourself. Do the research, try to dive in a little bit, see if you can make any money, test the concept, do some networking in that area, and then eventually make the ultimate decision to make it a full-time position or not.
Good advice.
Oh, both of you gave excellent advice. I know regarding the short-term training, we have many alumni who are interested in a 3-month boot camp in technology, and then can take their salaries to the next level. I love Mark's idea too about, working that second job and seeing if you can turn that second job into the next full-time job and career pivot. So you all gave some fabulous information. And Kathy, I also liked your advice on labor shortages and following the money trail, basically, to where the next opportunities are. That's wonderful. Well, Kathy, so I think it's so very interesting that you have this platform. We're here in the gig economy. We can now, have our groceries delivered to our house. We can have, fine dining delivered to our house. There's so many things that people are doing now in this gig economy. What inspired you to start Side Hustle?
It's kind of a long story, but I started working from home when my daughter was born more than 30 years ago, 32 years ago. And I loved having the freedom of, being able to raise my kids and work at the same time. And very few of my contemporaries had that same freedom. When the gig economy started gearing up, and people were pitching me, oh, you can make money doing this, you can make money doing that, all that. I was intrigued because I thought, well, maybe this is going to give people the same sort of opportunity that I had to kind of divorce yourself from the typical work day and do a work day that's going to fit your life a little bit better. And then I started digging in, and I realized that there were great opportunities out there, a lot of great opportunities out there, but there were also a lot of really abusive companies that were using the fact that people were confused by what the relationship was between them and the employer when they were working for a gig company. They assumed that there was an employee-employer relationship where you have certain safeguards like minimum wage and, overtime and, whatever, paid time off, all of these things that we take for granted. In the side hustle world, most of those things don't exist. You essentially work by contract, and because you're self-employed, if you work for free, well, you're working for yourself. So, you made that decision. And most of the people who work in the gig economy, that's not what they're understanding it to be. They feel like they're working for another employer. And so they expect to be paid for every hour. And so what I did with Side Hustle is I just wanted to create consumer reports, a simple, straightforward, formatted way that you could evaluate a side hustle like you could evaluate a car or a refrigerator. And so that's what we do. We have 6 standard things that we tell everybody, on any given side hustle, what it is, how much you're going to make per hour or per gig. We give it a score, which takes all sorts of factors into account, including the risk involved and the chance that you wouldn't get paid or you wouldn't get paid what you were expecting, at working conditions, all that sort of thing. But in any case, so that was the whole concept in a nutshell. And to be frank, I was kind of doing it for my kids. I was doing it for people who didn't have the time to go out and didn't have the expertise to go out and really do the investigative work to figure out how this platform was going to function. And I just thought, it's like anything in journalism. Ultimately, what we're about is shining a light so that the terms are clear, and then you have a fair playing field. And that's all I'm trying to do is level the playing field between these companies and individuals who end up working with them.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Kathy. Very interesting business. And so needed. It sounds like you're the consumer reports person for the side hustle. When we're buying a fridge, we go to Consumer Reports. Well, it sounds like your platform is that place where people can go and glean very important information as they move forward with a potential side hustle.
The thing I actually really love about it is that we've had a couple of different platforms actually change their policies because they got bad ratings on our site. And And that was the first thing that people saw when they searched their site on Google, and they saw our review and they said, well, what do we have to do to get a better review? And I'm like, play fair. It's pretty simple.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. And then, so for Mark, my question to you is, how were you able to keep yourself motivated? Now, you mentioned being an executive in music at Walt Disney Company and then software, and now consulting. How do you keep yourself motivated in building this consulting business? I know there's a lot of alumni on this call tonight and who will watch this webinar into the future, who have 30 or 20 years of experience in whatever the X is. And so they have the expertise to go out and sell that. And Kathy, mentioned that it can be very lucrative on some of the consulting platforms to do that, or to start your own business. What motivated you, and what advice would you give to our alumni who want to start their own consulting business?
For me, it was, as I mentioned earlier, it is about really understanding what I'm good at and understanding why the other person would value what I'm good at. Because at the end of the day, I could be good at a lot of things, but if no one assigns value to it, they're not going to pay me any money for it. So, but building it was tough, as I mentioned. And so for me, it was about celebrating the small wins. It wasn't about the first dollar being the small win or the 10th dollar. It was about a piece of validation that I got from a connection who potentially could introduce me to another person. And so at the end of the day, when I look back on my day, I was able to say, wow, I had a great day. I got this, and I got this. And now to the outside observer, they would say, well, so what? But for me, they were small wins that got me further on my path to being successful. And when you're a consultant, it's very personal. You're only selling this, you're selling yourself. And so when you get these small wins in selling yourself, it's really a reason to celebrate. And you just have to continually convince yourself these small wins are going to eventually add up. And fortunately for me, I've had over 100 clients in the last 15 years. And when a client says to me, oh my God, that was a great idea, that's going to make a huge difference in our business, and it does, that's a huge win. I really celebrate doing that. And it's a big piece of validation that, yeah, this consulting practice has value to people, value that they're going to pay for, and value for which they'll see results. And to me, it's that constant mental game you play with yourself to drive yourself forward. Even when you have failures, you also have these small wins and small successes. And it's really adding those up and creating value and celebrating those that gives you the motivation to go to the next day and the day after.
That's great. That's great. And I know, at 40 plus, even if people are trying to get jobs, there's a protected class. Ageism exists in the workplace. So the government has protected kind of people 40 to 70. So with this consulting business, you're ageless in that regard, would you say? Or you kind of?
Well, actually, it's an advantage. I mean, they look at me and they say, whoa, this guy's an older guy. He must know something. Well, that's one I got before I opened my mouth. And so, as opposed to the record business, which I left in my late 30s because I was the oldest guy, and so I wasn't really in tune with what the young people wanted anymore. Now I'm the oldest guy, so I have a lot of expertise and knowledge, or at least that's the assumption. So consulting is a great career for when you're over 40.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Well, we're all Trojans on this call, and we know that the Trojan Network is alive and well. And so my next question, and we'll start with Kathy, is we all know that building a network is essential. Can you share with us how it's benefited you in your career as you've made these pivots at 40 plus?
Oh, wow. It's benefited me in so many ways. It would be hard to tell you without giving you the story of my life. But the short version is when I left my secure job in the middle of the worst recession since the Great Depression, I never actually had to look for a job. I just started getting phone calls. And the reason why I was getting phone calls is that people I worked with, people I knew, were recommending me to other people that they worked with and knew. And so it became an extremely easy transition for me, where I never really had to worry a whole heck of a lot. Yeah, and when I decided to start Side Hustle again, all sorts of people that I knew that were in the news business. I mean, one of the challenges of starting a website is that you can just basically be invisible for years and years and years on end. And all sorts of other reporters saw what I was doing, respected me, and wrote about us. And so we got a, head start on that a lot of people don't get.
Wonderful. Mark?
So for me, I've been doing networking. It's really been the lifeblood of my consulting business. Other than my first 2 clients, over 100 of them, of the next 100 plus, I've gotten through networking, all through referrals. And for me, networking is a long-term play. And I equate networking with giving. So when I meet someone, if I just hand them my business card and they give me a business card, we're both going to throw those cards out when we get home. They have no meaning. There's no value assigned to them. But if I try to find out as much as I can about that other person, and my mindset is, how can I give to them? What I get back is that I'm now memorable. I've now, through the law of reciprocity, given them a reason to want to give back to me. But I do that selflessly and without expectation, because that's where the purity of it comes from. And I don't keep track, I don't keep score. I mean, if someone on this webcast wants to call me and ask for some thoughts and advice and continue the conversation, I'm happy to give. I mean, because at some point, somewhere through the universe, it's going to come back. But that isn't the main reason. Networking is giving. The more you give, the more successful your network will be.
Yeah, I would say similar. I've always enjoyed the company of other intelligent, passionate people, and just things happen. You talk to people; they're your friends, and somebody will have lost a job, or somebody will be looking for something new, and you want to help them, because they're great, and you feel like you're doing a favor to not just the person who's looking for the job, but to the employer. And I think that you should always do that. I always hate the word networking because it sounds kind of like using people, but in the real world, it's really just connecting people that you sincerely think should be connected for both of their benefit. You want to create a win-win. And I would say the only thing that on the side of the person who is being connected to people, what I always wanted to do for the people who networked on my behalf was to make them look good in the end. So if I knew somebody had recommended me for something, I was going to do a doubly good job just to make sure that that person looked good for making that call. So
I would also add that if you have this selfless approach to networking, it makes your job networking so much easier. I mean, if you're trying to close a deal, you're trying to get someone to do this for you or that for you, there's a lot of pressure. But if your sole job is to find out about someone else and see how you could be of value, it just makes networking so much more fun. You're so much more relaxed. It's so much easier. And people say I have a hard time networking. That's because of the pressure you put on yourself, plus whatever you may bring to the table. But for me, I mean, listen, if I had to try to achieve a result with every person I would go to, I would hate that. There's no fun in that. But the fun is to be able to meet people, give to people, and therefore you're providing value to them and you're having a good time yourself.
Exactly. So that symbiotic relationship, not take, but how can we give to each other and it'll come back. I like what you said. It'll come back. Even if it's not that person, it'll come back another way to you. I love that part. So a byproduct of networking, and I want to is mentoring. And I want to know, in the career pivots that both of you have made, how has mentoring, has it played a role? Has somebody mentored you along the way as you were making these career pivots? how does that look for you? And we'll start with Kathy.
I haven't had formal mentors. But I have joined groups where people for instance, there's a group called FinCon that is financial bloggers, and they help each other with everything from, how to build content to how to do technical things with your websites. And these are just wonderful organizations to get involved in, because you can do both. You can give and you can receive. You can, I've always felt like I also have been a longtime member of a group called the Society of Business Editors and Writers, or it was called that. They've changed the acronym. But in any case, and the same sort of thing, you often would find that the most valuable sessions were when you were standing in the hallway having coffee with someone, because you were just, doing, as Mark's talking about, just talking and learning what their issues were. And then again, often connecting them with people that that can help them solve that problem. And then they're doing the same thing for you. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, I remember when I made my first transition at a young age to A&M Records. That was my first job in the music industry, where I found and really blew out the career of a children's artist named Raffi. And we went from 0 to $15 million in 5 years in sales. And I knew nothing about the record industry. Most importantly, I knew nothing about the culture of the record industry. I was such the odd man out. And fortunately for me, the VP of marketing, even though I didn't work for him, took me under his wing and really taught me those things that they don't teach you in USC Business School, or they're the cultural things, the things that make you fit better, that make your voice resonate louder, that give you more power and more control over what you're trying to accomplish. Those are the things most people have to figure out for themselves. And that goes the same for when I transitioned into my consulting practice. I also am part of a small group, actually, of 5 or 6 USC Trojan graduates from Marshall. And we have a confidential group where we share things with each other, where we ask those questions that we would be afraid to ask anybody else because it feels kind of embarrassing. And that, is it a mastermind group? I don't know. That's a lofty title to give it. But I'm a member of like 2 or 3 of those types of groups, one with other consultants and one with these people from USC. And they're invaluable. And they're a really powerful form of networking, because oftentimes the things that I don't have answers to, they do, and the things they don't have answers to, I can help with.
Yes. And we talk about that a lot in terms of managing your career, that your alma mater is a great place to network, but also professional association. So again, your association with consultants and other kind of organic groups that have developed. And there's so many groups that our alumni can take advantage of, affinity alumni groups around industry and that. So definitely encourage alumni to tap into that, as well as professional associations. And then I heard one time, and Mark and Kathy, you can chime in on this, that mentors pick mentees. Mentees don't pick mentors. Is that right?
Heck if I know.
This person at A&M Records picked me. As a matter of fact, when he left A&M to go to a huge job at Universal, he pulled me aside. He goes, I always had your back, didn't you? I said, of course I did. He totally picked me.
Yes. So, okay, well, we're getting a lot of questions into the chat, and I will put on my reading glasses and we'll start with the first one. This question is for Mark. Mark, can you expand a bit on how you discovered your passion for the software industry after leaving music?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was learning to shop online, and I was so frustrated. I could never find anything I wanted. I could never be confident in my decision. I mean, back in those days, 77% of all shopping carts were abandoned. And I would probably abandon 90% of them, because I could never, and I was so frustrated. Why didn't the internet, I was this amazing vehicle to buy stuff. Why could I never be confident in my buying decision? And all of a sudden it occurred to me, wait a minute, I could solve that problem. I have no idea how, but no one else is solving it. I'm going to try to solve it. And so I found it was interesting. I was at DreamWorks at the time, and I had met this gentleman who worked for an advertising agency in Seattle. And I saw he was the only one that knew anything about technology. So I called him up and I said, here's my idea. What do you think? And he goes, it's a great idea. And there's another guy who presented the same idea to me 2 weeks ago. I'll introduce the two of you, which was, by the way, one of my first exposures to networking. So I meet the other gentleman, I fly to Seattle, and we both decided to start a business together. He had 17 years in software development. What he saw in a guy from the music industry, I have no idea, but I saw a lot of value in teaming up with him.
That's great. That's great. And then this question is for Kathy, and I caught on to this too. So we're on the same wavelength with this question. Could you please elaborate on the lucrative consulting platforms that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, sure. There's a consulting platform called Catalant, which typically people are making, I don't know, anywhere between $100 and $600 an hour. They're essentially you go on as an independent contractor, but it's a kind of McKinsey-like situation, a boutique consulting firm. There's Zintro, there's Maven, there's a company called SMA Inc. It does consulting in project management, engineering. There's several marketing platforms that, the range of pay is wide because obviously the level of experience is wide for the people who are signing up, but for Maple and what was the other one that I just reviewed, but you can find them on my site. Just go marketing or whatever it is that you want to pursue. You can find the review and roughly how much you earn from that site. But yeah, these the marketing platforms, they talk about earning anywhere between about $50 and $300 an hour. There are opportunities in accounting, in insurance, and law, medicine. There are new telemedicine and psychiatry platforms that are all online. So what I found is, so we founded Side Hustle about 4.5 years ago. And at the time, the bulk of side hustles were, stuff like Uber and Lyft and Postmates and DoorDash and whatever. But those kind of blue collar side hustles are actually declining. And what you're seeing is a huge increase in professional consulting platforms. Technology is another one. I mean, you can make a small fortune as a technology consultant, and you tend to work by the project rather than by the hour. And so often, if you're faster and better, you earn more. So yeah, the opportunities are extraordinary, and really, I find more every single week, and I am amazed at the wealth of opportunity and the breadth of opportunity.
Yes. And some of those consulting projects, I guess people could, as Mark was saying, keep their day job and do this part-time.
Oh yeah, yeah. In a lot of cases, what you're doing is you're jumping in as an expert for a company that really can't afford to hire a full-time employee. And so they're willing to pay you a premium price because they're going to hire you for a week, a month, 3 months, something like that, in order to solve a problem. And because you're solving a problem, you're really worth the kind of money that you're asking, which is going to be way, way more than what you would be paid as an employee.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, we have another question that came in, and both of you all can answer this one. When you transitioned from your, W-2 job to these new pivots, what were the major challenges encountered, and were people accepting of the transition? Like, what, Mark, you're leaving entertainment? You know what, Kathy, you're this freelance extraordinaire. Everybody knows you, even Jeopardy. What?
Yeah, are you talking about my husband? Because he was the one who was, I think, most shocked when I left the LA Times. It's like, what? What are you doing? And yeah, but I maybe I'm a little headstrong. I don't know. I wasn't asking for advice.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I was fortunate that my wife at the time believed in me and she was supportive. I'm not quite sure how much more difficult it would have been if she wasn't, but it would have been.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here's another question. What are your thoughts on announcing on your social media platform to your friends' extended network that you're looking for a new job opportunity? On the other hand, it seems there is a lot of potential opportunity for job leads there. Yet on the other hand, sometimes it can make one feel quite vulnerable. So on LinkedIn, you can put the little circle that says looking for work. What do you think about that, or other social media platforms?
I've had friends, approach me personally. Hey, I just left such and such a place and am looking for something else. And I go far out of my way to try and accommodate what they need and connect them with other people. Absolutely tell your friends, tell your coworkers, or or maybe not coworkers if it's going to jeopardize where you are, but tell people that you think would be willing to lend a hand. They can't possibly help you unless they know that you'd like them to.
I'm not sure social media would be the way that I would choose to do it. I'm a big believer in personal one-on-one communication. And it's more resonant when someone comes to me and says, hey, Mark, I'm thinking of a transition. Can you help me? If you think of anything, let me know. Then for me to just see something on someone's feed, even though it may be in a private group, if people want me to hear it, then they should talk to me and personalize it, because that's, to me, the reason that, that's part of the networking that works, is when it's personal, it's one-on-one, and when you really want to assist someone, then you'll go out of your way to think of things to help them with, as opposed to, all right, I'll keep it in mind, and then of course it's not kept in mind.
Yeah, I
Right.
think the personal approach is better than social media for sure. And also because social media is kind of indiscriminate. And so people that you wouldn't necessarily think would be in your camp are going to see that, just like the people who are. So yeah, definitely reach out directly to the people that you'd most like help from. But if that doesn't come up with the answers that you want, you can go more broadly, and sometimes it's very helpful.
Yeah, one other way to go more broadly is to come up with a group of 5 or 6 or 7 people that you believe would be interested in introducing you to other people, just to make a connection, not because they have a job, but just to broaden your network. And so if 7 people introduce you to 7 more people, all of a sudden you're up to 50.
That's right. And then I learned recently from one of our HR recruiters alumni from NBC Universal, is that at least for LinkedIn, if you don't have to put the I'm looking for work, but if you change something on your LinkedIn profile daily, then the employers that have they can source talent from LinkedIn, they'll see that you're making changes and the algorithm moves your profile up. So definitely I agree with Mark and Kathy. The targeted who can help you approach is number one. But 2, if you just want to be kind of seen by people who are searching for talent, keep making slight changes in your LinkedIn profile, and that will also hopefully get you a little notice from hiring managers and such. So we're having a lot of really good questions here. Here's another great question. What advice do you have for people who are pivoting back into the workforce, but want to pivot into a different industry? Who would like to take that question? Oh, both of you.
Well, I mean, the real question is, are you qualified? Have you done a personal self-assessment of what your attributes are, and do you fit that industry? And or do you even know whether you fit that industry? And I think this goes to what Mark was saying, you know, find people in that industry, get introductions, see if you can chat with them and see what's required to make that pivot, and before you leap and, you know, without the proper knowledge.
Yeah, I think Kathy's right on. I mean, it's really about that honest self-assessment as to what are you good at? And then the second honest assessment is, does the industry truly need what you are good at more than what is already there?
Yeah, always look at your competition.
Yeah, and this is a quick question for Kathy. Somebody's asking, how do you spell Catalan?
Oh, CATALANT. So
Oh, Catalan with
yes.
a T.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Here's another question. It might be a little similar. I find in modern times, job requirements are getting more and more specific. In other words, 5 years of web design. How can you pivot to a job you haven't done before, but you know you have the skills, and they would translate? Explaining it, the pivot on a cover letter, or pulling it out in terms on a resume with transferable skills. What do you recommend?
Well,
I recommend LinkedIn second tier connections, because a lot of and I'm not as familiar with this as perhaps you are, but a lot of these resumes go into some sort of filter that screens for things before a human even sees it. So if you go to your second tier LinkedIn connections, you can get introductions potentially to people at the company that you're trying to get into, and use those connections to have a conversation that maybe could bubble up to the hiring manager, so that you're not excluded because you don't have whatever the required term of experience is in a certain area.
you know, also show initiative and do it, you know, like, so anybody can start a side hustle and do this, like Mark was talking about, spend 3 hours a day on your own project and give yourself the experience that you need that way.
That's great advice. Excellent advice. Here's another question. Due to printed textbooks, I needed to make a career pivot out of publishing. So there's some, as we move forward and into the future, some industries are going sideways, right? But not as much demand. My passion led me to biotech because it's still working in science. I did informational interviews. I found breaking into biotech supply chain is hard because companies want people with experience in that industry, even if the work experience is similar. How do you get past that to get hired?
I'm going to talk again about doing this stuff as a side hustle. I just interviewed a guy who does medical writing and earns $170 an hour. And so this is very possible, and there's a lot of demand for people who can write, make sense of a survey or a study, and be able to take all this data and again, make it make sense to somebody else who's reading it and doesn't have a background in medical technology. So you have a knowledge, and so you want to show that skill. So start looking for those opportunities to show it, independently. You know, use your own initiative to find a way in that door, and eventually it will happen for you.
Yeah, I think that getting that experience, I mean, some industries, it's possible to get that experience through nonprofits where you focus on a specific area in a nonprofit. I think the side hustle job idea is a really strong one, because somehow you need to get some experience that is relatable, that you could speak to. It may not be 5 years, but if you can speak to it and you have a receptive audience, you have a good chance.
Well, and you also have to think about the things that you can say on your resume that you've done to pursue this particular thing, because when you're doing it on your own, you actually are taking the whole chain that, all these other people normally do these jobs, you're going to do it yourself. And instead of talking about the years of experience, talk about the success. That's actually one of the things that we find with the consulting platforms. They couldn't care less where you went to school, whether you went to school. What they want to know is if you're trying to be, say, an email marketer or a social media marketer, tell me what you've done. Tell me how you've measured that success. Have you taken this from, X page views to Y? Have you boosted the number of subscriptions or subscribers? Have you show results? And the results speak for themselves. So I think that yes, there are these, oh, I want 5 years, or I want a master's degree, or I want this, or I want that. But if you actually have a history of success, that actually speaks louder than anything else you can do.
Yes, we talk about that in terms of putting that resume together, or LinkedIn profile, to focus on the results. And so that's great. Really quick, if people can't necessarily get pay for this part-time experience that they're trying to build to pivot to another industry, what are your thoughts on volunteering?
If you want to volunteer, great. I'm a person who's always going to say, well, if you're really working, I think you should get paid for it. That's just, yeah. But if you have a charitable organization that you feel strongly about and you don't mind volunteering your time, absolutely. I mean, do that. But I don't see that as, certainly you could do that as a career pivot. I just see it as two separate things. I think that your work has value, and you should always keep that in mind, because one of the problems I think with volunteering with a charity is people forget that when you're free. And so you end up doing work that's kind of beneath you. You should be always looking at, is this benefiting me? Is it doing what I'm hoping it can do? If you want to, work for a charity and you want to hand out sandwiches, great, that's fine. That's a separate thing. But if you're doing it for a specific end, keep that end in mind, and don't allow yourself to get sucked into doing stuff that is not going to help your resume, is not going to help your career.
Exactly. So if you're going to volunteer, make sure it's strategic to help you with your career pivot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, we have 3 minutes left. 3 minutes is enough time to thank our wonderful alumni. Thank you so much, Kathy, Christoph, and Mark Jaffe, for spending your hour with us, sharing your pearls of wisdom. We love the Trojan family because our alumni always want to give back and always want to share their experiences. And I also want to thank Esther Lanier, our senior career advisor, for her help with this event, and Ashley Curley at the Alumni Association for her input, as well as Linda Greenfield, who helped recommend you all for this evening. So thank you, everyone. And I wish everyone happy holidays. And as we say, let's put up our 2 fingers, Mark and Kathy. What do we say?
Fight on.
Fight on, everybody. Let's beat the Utah on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.